Hello guys, welcome to another J for JavaScript tutorial. It's been 2 weeks since I uploaded a build project, and finally here we are. And if you follow me or are my connection on LinkedIn, you pretty much already saw the sneak peek of our build that we are going to do in this tutorial. Well, and you bet it's the best to do app in JavaScript on YouTube right now. So before I go through the demo or what kind of features we're going to implement, a shout out to my fellow developer with his interesting blog called Freshman. Freshman is a software engineer and his name is Ayolua Isaiah, and that is where I found the original to do design that inspired me to add a few things to create a whole new different design. As you can see, this is his original design, and I kept a few things, his icons and some of his JavaScript. So shout out to him. As you can see, it has the same similar functionality where you put something in a input text and then press enter, then the list appears on the page as well, because you can cross and so on and so forth. So something like that, original design. Shout out to you, Freshman. I encourage you to go check out his blog. You'll learn more about software development in JavaScript. So, what are the things we're going to look at? Well, we're going to look at HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And another important thing, we shall be implementing local storage. If you don't know what that is, well, you will know in when we start implementing it. So, local storage allows us to store data in browser sessions so that even though we refresh our browser, we still find our data, as you can see. Now, if we open our console, you can press F12 or right click and click on inspect. Under application in local storage, you can see that CodePen has stored a session of our text, as you can see, local storage, ID, and all that stuff, so that it always remembers there's something saved in a session, and you'll always find that in your browser. So that's pretty much how local storage works. Do not worry, we'll look more into that later, but for that, just know we're going to also implement local storage in our build. Okay, we'll look at all that, but this is going to be a somewhat long build, so we're going to cut it into two-part series. Part 1 will be HTML and CSS, and then finally part 2 will be JavaScript. So I hope you're excited, as you've already seen the demo showcase, and I hope you're excited to see the glass morphism effect, all these kind of techniques. And you can see if there's nothing in the text box, it prompts you with an alert telling you to please type something. So that's all pretty cool, really. And yeah, you're going to learn a lot, way much, to build on your JavaScript. So without further ado, let's get started. As always, I'll leave the code in our GitHub here for you to clone and play around with. The app is already running in our VS Code. As you can see, using live server, just right click and select open with live server or stop live server. And before I forget, I will leave timestamps for you guys to find interesting sections you want to start with, or simply watch the whole tutorial. Okay, so as always, let us start with the HTML. Again, we won't focus much on the HTML, but rather I'll explain what it does and how you understand or get the gist of what we're trying to build. So just here in our CodePen, Let's copy our code. It's a bit much, but really very simple. Paste it. Okay, so let's go through this one by one. So we have our main tag. The main tag simply contains the content, what the content that's going to display in the body. The body wraps everything around, and the main contains the main content of the HTML elements. For example, footers and nav bars are outside the main, and those are usually wrapped around the body element. So if that's confusing you, you should just do a quick query between the difference between the main tag and the body tag. So in our main tag, we have a div class that has a container which will style using our CSS, and we have our h1 with our title. Then we have another div. As you can see, welcome state is going to be this right here. As you can see, get things done and blah and so on and so forth. So let's see how it looks like in our plain HTML. As you can see, simple, ugly right now, yes, but once we start designing or adding our styles, we'll get to put everything in order. Okay, then we go to our SVGs, which is a checklist icon. As you can see right now, it's black because we haven't used CSS yet to bring it out. And as you can see, there's an SVG tag, there's a use tag. All this sounds confusing, but I'm going to explain them just in a moment. We have our h2s, and then we have our class, which has our form input. As you can see, our input is right here, and our button that says okay, with a placeholder of subscribe to J for JavaScript, which you should, by the way. Then we have our list, UI list, the class of to-do list, and two classes, JS to-do list. And this is where we'll inject our JavaScript to include our lists. Whenever you press enter, this is where our list will be curated in our web page. So outside the main, we have our main SVG tags and the icons we're going to use. So let us explain more about the SVG tags and the other tags like symbol, use, and defs for you to understand what we're trying to do here. Okay, so let's start with the SVG tag. As you can see, I'm on the MDN web docs. They have very beautiful references and insightful knowledge. I will leave all these links in the description below. So SVG simply stands for Scalable Vector Graphics. And as you can see, the SVG tag is a container that defines a new coordinate system and viewpoint for SVGs. As you can see, this is our main SVG here that is containing all our icons we're going to use in the later stage. And the defs tag, which is also an SVG tag, is simply used to store graphical elements that will be used at a later time. As you can see, we open our defs tag, and inside our defs tag, we put in our SVGs that we'll use later, right? As you've seen, store objects that will be used at a later time. So inside our SVGs, we use a tag known as symbol, and what the symbol does is used to define graphical template objects, which can be instantiated by the use element. So as you can see, this is our icon with the path and the height and all those kind of coordinates, and can only be instantiated as you've seen with the use tag. If we go back to where I told you I will explain everything to you, you can see that we use the use tag to actually now call our icon. Now if we read something about the use tag, we see that it takes nodes from within the SVG document and duplicates them somewhere else. So we get them from here and then duplicate the SVG icon right here, which was instantiated in the symbol. As you can see, the ID correlates with the use tag ID. So our SVG container again has a class checklist icon, which we will design to our desires in the CSS section. And that's pretty much it. As you can see, we have our delete button, delete icon, and we have our add icon, which we saw here in our form button right here. And that's pretty much what we have in our HTML. Again, I'll leave these links in the description below. And we are pretty much done. So let's commit our changes to our GitHub. You are pretty much experts by now. So let's do a quick push here. Come to our branch icon, add our changes, commit, and publish your changes remotely. Now, if we check our remote repository, we should be seeing the changes. Create a pull request. Let's merge our pull request to master, and now we can check back to our master and pull the changes. And we should be getting the latest changes from our remote repository. If we go back to our browser, we should be seeing the changes. Let's close this. Okay, great. Now, next, let's look at CSS. Okay, now to our CSS. Copy our CSS and paste it here. We see some warnings. Let's correct that. See an error. Click here. Remove the background. Now let's ensure that we have connected our script, our styles file to our HTML. Let's do that. Let's close this for now. Now let's check our browser. As you can see, we already have our to-do list already formed up, just adding our CSS. So let us go through this element by element and see what we have tried to achieve here. But just before we move forward, if you realize something, our icons are not displaying, and that must do with our HTML. Remember, wrap your main around the body. And that should fix it. Great. Now that our icons are showing, let's proceed to our CSS. So from the top, we have our font family we want to use, which is the Architect Doctor from Google Fonts. And then we have our HTML with border box sizing, border box. Then the steric selector or the all selector selects everything in our content, has our box sizing inherit, our margin and padding. And these colon before and colon after, those are simply pseudo elements in CSS that allows us to put content without needing to use HTML, as we will see later in the CSS. So we have our body, of course, that has our font family, our background, and our background has these colors, this aquamarine kind of color, greenish color, turquoise color. We have our light blue, our pink, our orange. All these colors will be shifting or transition to and from, as you see in our gradient. And animation element, gradient 15 seconds is infinite. So they never stop, just keep moving and moving and moving. Again, you can change these colors to your liking. Then we have our keyframes. Keyframes in CSS allows us to control CSS sequences while we're animating, give it more control, more styling, and how we want the animation to move, in which direction and at what percentage. As you can see, background position 0 to 50%, 50% background position should be 150%, and to 100% the background position should be 0 to 50%. So as you can see, it starts from 0 to 50, then to 150, then goes back to 0 to 50. As you can see, takes on the whole color when blue comes in, then the other color in our gradient comes in with 50%, then it becomes 100%, then finally on and on like that, as you can see right there. Okay, then we have our container, which we saw in our HTML, our main div, primary parent div. Here, our container that holds all our content. And in our container, we have a width of 100%, max width of 500 pixels, margin of auto, which centers our element. We have our padding, we have our color of this grayish color, which again, you can change it to your liking that suits you. I think we should change this to white. And that doesn't look bad at all as well. But I think I'll stick to the grayish color. Okay, then we have our mean height of 100 view height, our margin top, our bottom, our and of our overflow Y auto. Our overflow Y comes into play when we put in a lot of content. This is not going to work because there's no CSS yet, but in our demo here, if you put in a lot of content, as you can see, we get this overflow of Y to auto that doesn't bring this ugly scroll when the content reaches its height. Okay, then we have the app title, which is here in our h1 class. App title, my to-dos. Again, we give it a text line of center, margin bottom 20 pixels, and font size of 80 pixels. Opacity, this is something I was playing around in the demo, but you can remove that as well. Then, of course, we have our SVG container, which we say this contains our scalable graphics, and our width is 64 pixels and height 64 pixels. If you remove that, you're going to see that they're going to contain the size or its current size that is in the SVG icon itself. But if you want to control the height and width, this is how you do it. Then our to-do list, if you check our HTML, as you can see, it's right here under our form, which I said we will put our lists using JavaScript in the later stage. Okay, then we have our ad right here, our button, our ad, which again we style to our liking in the CSS. As you can see, background none, border none, margin left 10 pixels. Our SVG, our very SVG is where we added the cursor, the width, and the center and the transition, as you can see here. Then we have our to do item. The to do item will be added in our list using JavaScript, so this has no impact right now, because we don't need it right now. We can comment it out, it has no effect. So we can comment that out. As you can see, it won't affect our JavaScript or our CSS and HTML. Okay, then we have our done span. Again, this is all in the JavaScript, as we shall see later, and the tick as well. And again, as you can see, the pseudo element in CSS allows us to put in content without necessarily using HTML. The content, which is our tick, will be shown when someone clicks done. Okay, done. If you remember this is a strike through. Refresh that. This is the done part. When you click done, your character or your task is underlined. So this is how we do it. Again, all these we really don't need them now, as well as the tick and the done, as well as the delete, which we shall all look at in JavaScript. And that's pretty much it in our CSS. As you can see, we have looked at the gradient, we have looked at the icons, styling, and the font family, which again you can change to your style and mood and your creativity. So yeah, actually, let's uncomment the CSS out and we'll explain it while we implement our JavaScript. And we hadn't finished our CSS. We had forgotten to look at the form, which has a width of 100%, display flex, as you can see, content space between, and a margin bottom of 20 pixels. Our welcome section, as you can see right here, column in this direction, align center, align item center, justify content center, and display flex. Right. Margin bottom 20 pixels. Okay, that's about it. So our styles that we have uncommented for JavaScript will make sense when we start styling or when we start adding lists using JavaScript, and how the styles make sense. For now, that's our CSS, and I hope this made sense. If it didn't make sense, we can try to rewatch it again. Hit me up in our Slack community, which is J for JavaScript. I recommend you join. And yeah, other than that, let's commit these CSS changes and bring them to our master. As always, create a new branch. Add your changes. Let us check our GitHub repository. Let's commit or merge rather. Check out our master. And we should see the changes reflected in our browser. As you can see, nice. And that has come to an end of our first build, part one of our to-do app in HTML and CSS. I hope you learned something from this. And as I said, I'll provide the resources you saw in our build, the SVG tags, the diffs, the symbol, and CSS stylings, the pseudo element for you to get to know more about them and how we use them in web development. Other than that, I'll catch you in part two where we now implement our JavaScript and see how everything now communicates with each other. As always, subscribe, like, and join the JavaScript community J for JavaScript on our Slack channel. All links in the description below. Again, shout out to Freshman who helped us, who inspired our overall design of today. Okay, catch you in the next one. Have a lovely day. Bye bye. And just before I go, if you find yourself you have a passion for Python as well, I have a fellow colleague and has amazing tutorial in Python and takes you all the way from the basics to advanced concepts from Django frameworks, Flask frameworks, API, fast APIs, all that interesting stuff using React, Python, all that juicy stuff using Python. And his name is called Sally Jonathan. So I recommend you check out his channel and subscribe. As you can see, I'm subscribed to it and I get to watch some Python tutorials just to get the hang of some concepts. Okay, that's about it. Like and subscribe to his channel, and yeah, add Python to your development kit. Okay, that's about it. Bye bye, and see you in the next one.